Okay, let's get started here. So this is going to be a video tutorial showing you how to build a rubric in LiveText. So we're starting all the way at the beginning. So you go to LiveText.com and then once you get here, you're going to hover over login, provide your username and your password, and then hit enter or login. And once you're logged in, remember that we land here on our LiveText dashboard. And before we go any further, let's talk a bit about your options for creating rubrics. One option is actually you make it very specific to a course. You would click on your courses tab. You would select a course. Then you would go to the assignments tab. And then you would create an assignment, and within that wizard that allows you to create that assignment, you would attach a rubric to it, or you would embed or build that rubric directly in that assignment. So that's one way you can do it. The method that I'm going to talk about today is actually a little bit different. It keeps the rubric separate from discrete assignments that you create in courses, and it uses the LiveText Docs. And people ask, why is this method better than creating it within a course? And basically it's about flexibility. By creating the rubric in your LiveText Docs, it makes a document that you can use with multiple assignments in the future. So if you create one rubric that is flexible enough, you could potentially use it for multiple assignments in an array of courses. So I just think it gives you more flexibility. Also, by creating the document separately from an assignment, you don't have the pressure of like, I need to finish this assignment, which means I need to finish this rubric and get it done. If you have a document in your LiveText doc, it's something that you can be possibly working on over time and perfecting. So again, it's just more flexible ultimately. So anyway, how do we get started? We're going to jump right in here, and we're going to go to our LiveText Docs tab. And when we get into our LiveText Docs, it will basically see a listing of all the all the docs that are part of their LiveText Docs portfolio. And as you can see here, there are several. But we're going to go ahead and create a new one. So you do that by clicking on this new button. And at this create a document page, it gives you some templates that you can choose from to get started. And we're actually going to do that, but then we're going to choose a specific template. It's listed under here under assessments. It's this first one called Design Your Own Assessment. Once we click on that, you notice on the right hand side here, this summary of this template opens. So it gives you some information about the creator, who created it, when was it created. But it also tells us, what are the basic elements of this template. And this one here allows us to incorporate standards or to import standards to this document. And it's also going to allow us to build out a rubric, and that's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and click on create a document or create document. So the next thing you're going to be prompted to do is to give this a title. And in this case, you should give this thing a title that will allow you to figure out what you're looking at. Remember that all the documents get listed in your LiveText Docs portfolio, so you want a title here that's going to help you be able to identify it later. And we're going to pretend that we're making this rubric for an English 100 class. So let's go ahead and call this one English 100. And it's going to be specifically only for CSLOs. So we'll call it ENG 100 CSLO rubric. And then we're going to click on OK. And then LiveText will generate this sort of overall summary. And it actually is a wizard too. It's going to help us build this document. But here's our summary. Here's our title. And then we have these two sections in this document. So the first one is called standards, and this is where we're going to import our CSLOs. And the second part is called rubric, and this is where we'll actually build out our rubric. So let's start with the standards. So you can either click here or click on this edit button. And it's going to provide you with this overview of standards associated with this doc, which is nothing. We don't have any because we haven't. It's a brand new document and we have not imported or associated any standards with this document just yet. So we're going to click on add. And we're going to be presented with a couple drop-down menus and a search box that we can use to easily incorporate the standards into this document. So the first drop-down allows us to isolate the overall library that we're using. And there's several to choose from here. All sets has things like, native standards if you're teaching automotive or something like that, or other types of standards associated with specific disciplines. But in this case, we're going to look at the Kauai Community College set. So that gives us our overall library that we're looking at. We can isolate that further by using this second drop-down menu. And this one allows us, again, some options. Are we looking at CSLOs for this academic year? Potentially, you could be incorporating PSLOs with this document also. But again, we're just focused on CSLO, so we're going to choose this option. And in this search box, this is how we're going to limit our search a bit by putting in ENG 100, because again, we're going to make an English 100 rubric. So we're going to hit search. And by putting in this ENG 100, it has it's only showing us CSLOs that are associated with English 100. If we didn't put this in here and we click search, what we would be looking at are all the CSLOs for all the courses at Kauai Community College for this academic year. So this is a great tool to use to isolate this a bit. So anyway, we're going to, these are all correct, so there's 5 SLOs for English 100. We're going to click on this select all box, and then we're going to click on add. So once we click on add, it goes back to that screen that we started out with that showed us, that we didn't have any standards, but now we see we've added 5 CSLOs. If you wanted to, say you wanted to add the PSLOs to this rubric too, you would do it in a similar way. You would use the add button, select the overall library, isolate it to the PSLO library, look for the liberal arts PSLOs because that's where English belongs, and select the PSLOs that you wanted to associate with it and click add, and then you would see a list, it listed here or them listed here. In this case, again, we're just looking at CSLOs. I'm happy we have all of them here. I'm going to go ahead and click on save and finish. Okay, so now we see our 5 SLOs have been populated into this standard section of this document. So let's go ahead and focus on the second part, which is the rubric, and this is where we're going to build it out. So we're going to click on the edit button there. And the very first thing you need to do is change the title of this section from, don't just leave it on this default rubric. This section title gets used as one of the filters in the LiveText database. So if you don't change this, we're going to have multiple assignments, or multiple assessments that use this thing called rubric. So what I would suggest is at the very least call this or entitle this the same thing that you used to entitle, as a title for your document. So we're going to call this English 100 CSLO rubric. The next thing you're going to have to determine is, how many different levels of assessment are you going to be using in this rubric. So if you click on this drop-down menu, it gives you some, more common options. If you didn't want to use these drop-down or this drop-down menu, you could also use this add button, which essentially adds columns. Every time you click add, it would add a column to what is going to become this table. In this case, we're going to use the drop down, and we're going to choose this very basic pass-fail option. But I don't like the terms pass and fail. So even if I choose one of these pre-built ones, you can always edit it. And I don't like pass, so I'm going to say meets instead. So I'm going to type meets, and you notice it changes. And I'm going to change this one to, instead of fail, I'm going to say does not meet. And if I click outside of the box, the changes occur. But I don't also want to change that. You notice here that this rubric is a 2-point scale. So if you meet, you get 2 points. If you don't meet, you get 1 point. And I'm going to change that. I just want to have a very basic 1-point scale. So if you meet, you get 1. If you don't meet, you don't get anything. So 0. Okay, so one thing I should say too before we move on is that you know, the level of assessment that we use, if you're teaching a course like English 100 that has multiple sections and it's being taught by, you know, multiple instructors, it's probably a good idea for that program to come together and determine a more common level of assessment, something more standard. Because if someone is using a 1-point scale and someone else is using a 10-point scale, if we're just looking at points overall, they don't quite align. If we don't use any points, because you actually can set both of these to 0, and we're just looking at, you know, titles, it makes it difficult, right? If the title isn't something very definitive, what are we saying is a meet versus something that exceeds or something like that, right? So it's probably a better idea to come up with a more common assessment level or levels, especially with courses that have multiple sections. Okay, so regardless, we're just going to go with this meets and doesn't meet 1-point scale. The next thing we're going to have to do is to populate the actual elements that we're going to be measuring in this rubric. And I'm going to add 5 rows here because we're going to create a very basic CSLO rubric. So once I add my 5 rows, I can edit these cells in each of these rows by just clicking on that cell. And we're going to change this, and we're going to call this CSLO1 instead of element 1. And here in this available standards section of this menu, I'm going to select CSLO1. So if you just hover over it, you notice the title opens. So I'm going to select CSLO1, and I'm going to click on add here. So you notice when I click add, CSLO1 is actually now associated with this row in this rubric. So I'm going to do that for each of these here. So we'll do CSLO2, CSLO3, and then one more, so CSLO5. And then if you just click outside of the box, there's all of our changes are being reflected there. And one thing too we should talk about is you notice that the default setting for each of these rows is that LiveText weights each row equally. So each row is worth 20%. Now if you wanted to alter that weighting, you could actually click in this cell and in this weight box type in a different whole number. Now it's not as intuitive as saying, well, I want CSLO1 to be worth 25% versus 20%. You can only punch in whole numbers here, and it's not percentages. You kind of gotta just type in numbers. So say we want this to be worth 33%. I can type in 2, and you notice this number on the bottom actually changes, right? So instead of 5 elements, which is really what we have here, it's saying we have 6 elements now, and that this one row is worth 2 of 6, or 33% of this rubric. And so again, you cannot just type in a percentage, you just have to put in numbers until the number actually reflects the percentage that you want. So anyway, it's not as intuitive as it could be, I guess, but that's just the way it is. In this case here, I'm going to let each row be weighted equally, so I'm just going to leave it at 1. So again, each row is weighted 20%. One last thing to talk about before we move on is that if you actually want to add some description here on how you're determining whether a student meets or does not meet in terms of this element that we're measuring here, you can actually double click in these cells and define that. So for example, say that in order for a student to meet SLO1 for this assignment, I'm going to say that they need to have a 70% or higher on their pre-writing assignment. Consequently, if they get a 69% or lower on the same assignment, they don't meet, right? So this allows us to describe here, and this can help either you if you forget how you're going to determine this, or more importantly, people that are looking at your assessment data, they know exactly how you determine this. You're saying 70% or higher on a pre-writing assignment allowed you to determine whether the student attained this CSLO or not. So it's probably a good idea to provide that information in these cells. I'm not going to do it right now for the sake of time. I'm going to say we're done. Oh, one thing too is, as you're doing this, if you are doing this over a long period of time, you would probably want to edit your changes and click Save Changes as you're moving along, so you don't lose the progress that you're making. In this case, we're going to forego that, and we're just going to say Save and Finish because we're done. So now we're back at that original page, right? So where we had our standards, which was blank, but now we've populated our standards with our CSLOs. In this section, our rubric section, which was blank, but now it's not because we built out our rubric. So we have everything we need here. So we've successfully completed or built this rubric. It's already saved. There's nothing you have to do at this point. If you go back to your LiveText Docs listing, you will see it there, right? So if you click on it, it'll open it up again. There it is. So we are done. So step 1 is done. We've built our rubric. I'm going to stop here, and in a subsequent video, I'll show you how you actually attach this rubric to an assignment within a course. So if you have any questions, let me know. Contact information is below. And good luck building your rubrics. Thank you.